What is going on, everybody? If you clicked on this video, you're most likely looking for some week winning players as well as an easy walk through the park win. Lucky for you, that's exactly what I'm going to give you guys in this video. So let's get started. Go ahead though and comment any of your start sit questions in the comments of this video, and I'll be getting to them all before tip off. The first guy we need to be going through and starting this week is Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, who had somewhat of a bad game last week, only putting up 7 fantasy points, but I'm really not worried whatsoever, even in the slightest. If we look at his chart, he had double-digit targets over the last 3 games, and he's almost averaging 10 targets a game over the entire season. But outside of his amazing target share and volume throughout the season, he also gets a positive, great matchup against the Seahawks secondary, who ranks top 3 in points allowed to fantasy wide receivers. And this is by far the best matchup he's had since week 1 and 2. But this game should be relatively high scoring and offensive minded. The Seahawks offense itself has been pretty good, so really it's a win-win for Marquise Brown. Let's say the Cardinals stay close in the game, he's going to get his regular target volume, but if they go down against a great Seahawks offense, going to be more passing volume and opportunities, of course. But a stat that I really do love is that Marquise Brown averages a 32% first read share, which just means when Josh Dobbs is going to pass, Marquise Brown is the first guy he looks for to be open 1 out of every 3 pass attempts. He also has a 43% air yard share, which just means he gets the targets, and when those targets come his way, they are very valuable. But I really shouldn't have to say much more. The targets have been there through really tough matchups over the past couple weeks, and Dobbs should be more consistent against an easier Seahawks secondary. And this game also has a higher implied team total, which means more points and more opportunities. But real quick, if you guys have made it this far in the video, I would seriously appreciate you dropping a like or even a subscribe. You already found some great information if you're still here, so you might as well keep getting them every single week. But moving over to another wide receiver we need to be starting this week is Zay Flowers. If you've seen any of these Ravens games so far this year, it's pretty easy to tell that he is the clear #1 option on this team. He's led the entire offense in targets over the past 2 weeks, and he's coming into this matchup against the Lions, who are top 10 in fantasy wide receiver points allowed. And the real great news here is that there is no target competition outside of Mark Andrews. Zay Flowers is the only wide receiver in this entire offense to ever get 60% of the snaps on the field consistently. Bateman and Odell have been absolutely atrocious this year. They cannot be trusted, and they are not trusted by this offense. This is a great game script for the Ravens against the Lions that have no David Montgomery, who has officially been ruled out. And this really is good because that means they can't spam him with 20 rushes a game and keep this really slow pace. And we've seen that Gibbs really elevates this pace of the offense, and he's going to be the only running back to get a decent amount of carries this week. And the Lions have been a good team all season long, so this shouldn't be any kind of blowout. If anything, the Lions will blow them out, but I expect it to be a close game. Vegas and the sports books and lines also expect it to be close. This is a great matchup all the way around. He's seen the target volume. He should be able to continue that this week. But another wide receiver we need to look to start, and this really shouldn't be that much of a debate. I shouldn't have to put him in this video, but I've seen a whole bunch of people asking me about starting him this week. It's gonna be Tyler Lockett. As of the video recording, DK is still not practicing. They've tried to be careful with him this year. He hasn't missed a game. The Seahawks could easily try to play it safe and keep him out this game just to give him a little bit more time to recover. And if that does happen, Tyler Lockett to the moon. But outside of that, regardless of if DK plays or not, they get a great matchup against the Cardinals, who allow the 4th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. And like Hollywood Brown, this is why I say it's a great matchup in general. It should be more high scoring because these defenses and secondaries aren't the best. Not to mention Tyler Lockett has a history of burning the Cardinals, so if you're into any superstitious kind of things, there you go. But the Cardinals are very bad against slot wide receivers. Tyler Lockett gets a decent amount of work in there, which also makes JSN a decent start this week. I wouldn't really recommend it, but if you're in a deeper league and you need a spot start, JSN should be decent, especially if DK is out. But Tyler Lockett has been better than expected this year. Decent amount of targets, decent volume, even with DK playing the entirety of the season and the addition of JSN. But I was just talking about this situation, looking over at the running backs we need to be starting with no hesitation this week. The first one has to be Jahmyr Gibbs. First of all, it is official that there is no David Montgomery in this game, and we know what that means. We saw what happened last time David Montgomery was out. If you guys don't remember, I'll remind you very quickly. 17 carries, 80 yards on the ground, and that was against an Atlanta defense who is top 10 against running backs. He does get a matchup against the Ravens, who don't have the best run defense, but also not an insanely hard run defense either. But this game should be fast paced, and in PPR leagues, Gibbs should get a lot of receptions and checkdowns. And for those of you that are worried about Craig Reynolds, you really shouldn't be. In the last game with no David Montgomery, he saw 4 carries for 18 yards and really was not much of a factor. He will still get a few carries here and there if he plays. He is limited. He might not even play. He's trending towards suiting up, but regardless, he won't have that big of a role. Jahmyr Gibbs will be the workhorse back in this offense, regardless of how much the team actually wants that to happen, which is crazy to say. If you're drafting a running back 12 overall, I assume you're going to use him they don't really want to, but now they don't have a choice. Dan Campbell has come out and said that they want to play it safe with him. They don't have a choice this week. They need for him to go. He's going to get a bulk of the carries. It's been said by coaching staff, beat reporters, and everybody else. His pass catching ability gives him a higher floor, so he's not going to be that risky. And I know it's been harder to trust him, and he is coming off an injury for the very first week, coming back now. But if you're ever going to start him, it's going to be the weeks that David Montgomery is out, so we need to be throwing him in our lineup when we can. But speaking of throwing running backs in our lineup when we can and when we need to be starting Brian Robinson again. This week he gets a great matchup against the Giants, who are top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the running back position. And the really interesting thing here about the Giants defense is that they are top 5 in explosive runs allowed, 9th highest in rush yards after contact, and 6th highest in rush yards a game when they're in zone defense. And you might see all these numbers that I'm saying and say, wow, nice, big numbers, cool. But why I'm telling you all this and why it's important is because these statistics and these kinds of runs make up 80% of the carries he takes. We also get the possibility this week with how the Giants have been playing of maybe this game won't be close and the Commanders will actually be able to use Brian Robinson the way they've intended, which is a lot of carries and a lot of usage, controlling the pace of a game, which they haven't been able to do a lot recently because they've been passing so much to keep up with other teams because their defense is so bad. But there is a real shot that the Giants just absolutely suck again this week, and his numbers have been lower, but that's only because of his defensive matchups and game scripts. Now he has a positive matchup in both of those areas, and the last time that happened, he's averaged 18 carries and 70 yards with a touchdown a game. We should also be looking to start Amari Cooper this week without a doubt. If we watched last week's game against the 49ers, he absolutely bailed out PJ Walker every chance he had. He might have only had 4 catches, but his day was a lot better than it looked, and that's considering the really bad matchup he had against the 49ers defense. But Amari Cooper is dominating the air yard share with 42%, which is top 5 in the league. He gets targets. They're very, very valuable when he does get them. He also gets a great matchup against the Colts defense, who rank number 1 in air yards allowed. Again, this is a great matchup and his strengths match perfectly with this defense. They allow a whole lot of deep balls and opportunities downfield. That is where Amari Cooper gets a bulk of his usage. And another interesting stat here is that the Colts are top 5 in pace per game with Gardner Minshew. And if you didn't watch any of the videos, let me explain to you what this really means. We can just put 2 and 2 together. If the Colts are going to be more fast paced, it means they're going to run more plays and have more passing opportunities, and that's going to lead the Browns to be on the field more. It's going to be a higher paced game in general. A lot of offense is going to be generated here. Obviously, that benefits Amari Cooper if there's more pass attempts on both sides of the ball. Regardless of the Browns defense being very good this year, this game shouldn't be out of hand. Jonathan Taylor should be near full strength as well. But speaking of volume, it is finally time to unleash Christian Watson, who saw a 23% team target share against the Raiders in their last game. Oh, and it's not just the targets. He had a 70% air yard share in their last game as well. He might not have caught a lot of passes, but he had 7 targets and an insane amount of yardage. We saw that he had a whole bunch of deep threat potential last year, and now he's the only one getting that. Now he gets a great matchup against the Broncos secondary, who has actually been worse than the numbers have expected. Watson is likely to play a majority of the game with Patrick Surtain on him, which seems scary, but he really hasn't been that great. He's averaged just under 80 yards a game to opposing wide receivers he plays against this season, so that matchup itself shouldn't be steering you away from starting Watson. But we've learned time and time again that we have to be trusting anybody against this Broncos defense. We've seen week in and week out, they can't stop anybody. We're gonna keep continuing going back to the well while we still can. And the reason I say their pass defense has actually been worse than the numbers say they are is because they're allowing every single team to just run all over them, so they don't need to pass to stay in the game. They're just not a great defense overall, and this is a spot we need to be targeting as many players as we can that are fantasy viable. So I also like starting Aaron Jones this week a lot, but I didn't put him in this video because it's pretty obvious that we should be starting Aaron Jones. I don't feel like I should have to say that. He's a great player with an even greater matchup. He is limited. It looks like he will be good to go this week. Regardless of it, if he's playing, we need to be starting him. You guys know I love to end these videos off with the must-start defenses we can stream off the waiver wire. If you guys have a defense on bye, or maybe the one you have now just isn't good and you need another spot start, going on the waivers and picking up a defense, streaming them every week is a great way to go about it. Over the course of the season, it usually grades out higher than just sticking with one team's defense and their bad schedule and good schedule. The first defense we can be adding to start this week is the Packers defense. They're only rostered in 23% of leagues. They had their bye week last week, which gives them a little bit more time to prepare for this game against the Broncos, and they're just not a good offense either. This Broncos team is just very bad in general all the way around, and it's one of those teams that we need to be targeting when we're looking for a defense. Their offensive line is pretty bad. That's going to lead to more sack opportunities, which leads to more fantasy points. You can also expect that the pressures on those passes are going to lead to Russell Wilson throwing more interceptions and making more mistakes, and you could look at the Broncos matchups and see that they're putting up a decent amount of points every week, but that's really only because their defense is so bad. They need to be passing to stay in these games, and that could lead to even more interceptions. The Packers offense or defense isn't elite by any means, but when you're playing against the Broncos, they might as well be, and they do have Jair Alexander, so it is a plus. In general, we should look to be starting any defense that gets the Broncos offense in a matchup. It's worked so far this season. We're going to keep rolling with it while we can. But speaking of targeting bad offenses, we gotta go through and start the Raiders defense. We need to be going and running to grab their defense sooner rather than later, because after this news came out, their roster percentage have been going up so high. There is no Justin Fields in this game. He has been ruled out, and it's not like he's some amazing quarterback like Patrick Mahomes that we're gonna have a really big downgrade from, but there's gonna be a huge downgrade because his backup quarterback is booty cheeks, and we saw it last week. He got his first NFL start halfway through last week against the Vikings defense, who was absolutely atrocious. He only had 80 passing yards and an interception, but the Raiders defense have kind of been putting it together recently. They had 4 sacks last week and an interception. I guess a safety too, if you want to count that towards their stats, and I get that's only one game. You can't take it against them, especially against a Patriots offense that isn't great, but it's not like the Bears offense without Justin Fields is much better. And the last defense we can be starting here is the Buccaneers. We can grab them off waivers. I know they didn't look great against the Lions last week, but it's the Lions offense. They're pretty decent, and their offense is nowhere near the Falcons, which is the matchup they get this week. And these defenses are in order, by the way. I would take the Packers first, then the Raiders, then the Bucs. All of them are amazing starts if you can get any of them. The Falcons offense has not been great, and that's really just because of Desmond Ridder. He is so turnover prone. I mean, he had 3 interceptions last week. Any defense playing against Desmond Ridder has proved to be a positive matchup, and that's going to continue this week. Not to mention he's playing the Bucs defense, which are top 10 in pretty much every metric you can think of, and I don't trust Desmond Ridder to have 2 decent games back to back. But that is going to finish this video. If you guys did enjoy, I seriously appreciate you guys watching, and make sure to stick around for tomorrow's must sit video. You don't want to miss that.